Greetings fellow gamers, PoE addicts, oil enthusiasts, people waiting for a new league. On today's content I'm gonna talk about the Blight League experience. I am fully aware that as of me uploading this video, Blight still has some kick on it, but it is soon to be over, and if you really think about it, there is not much point in playing it anymore, considering that we are so close to 3.9 and Metamorph. If you are anything like me and you don't wanna get burned out before a new league content, you probably dropped the league recently. I personally recommend doing the same, especially if you play this game for ungodly amounts of time, like me. Before we jump into what Blight League brought to the table, if you end up enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The video is gonna be a bit long, so you may wanna get something to eat, something to drink, have it in the background, I don't know, but there's a lot to be said, so make sure you're comfy and let's see if Blight was as essential as the oils some people preach about. Okay, so what was Blight League? Blight League was a spin on the tower defense formula adapted for an action RPG. In Blight League we met and helped Sister Cassia destroy Blight growths. We did this by playing tower defense as a minigame. While every encounter provided you with some resources to build initial towers, monsters killed during the minigame also provided you with these resources to keep building and upgrading those towers, like an actual tower defense, as redundant as all of that may have sounded. Just like any other tower defense game, your core, in this case the pump, has a limited health pool that cannot be healed or repaired, so it was in your best interest to keep all the monsters away from it. There were different types of towers: lightning, cold, fire, melee, support and minion towers. Upgrading the towers to their final tier allowed you to choose between two versions of each tower that changed how these behaved. In some cases they provided offensive bonuses, on other cases they were support bonuses. Smart placement and combinations of the tower variety allowed you to complete the activity with ease. To keep the encounter challenging, portals from which the enemies spawned will indicate what type of tower was ineffective against the monsters from that portal. This was shown via a symbol on top of their spawner. This didn't mean that the monsters were immune to whatever tower type they branded, but it did mean that they will march through the damage or debuffs regardless. At the same time, Blight encounters had the chance to spawn unique monsters that will march alongside the infected brethren and will take more damage to take down. Unique monsters had different attack patterns and skills and will ramp the difficulty of the encounter considerably, especially in higher tier maps and especially when multiple of them spawn at the same time. If you were successful defeating the encounter, you'd get a variety of rewards from the spawn portals where the monsters came from. However, the main Blight rewards fell into two categories: oils and blighted maps. The oils could be used with Cassia to anoint rings and amulets, though blighted unique items also allowed you to anoint them too. You could use oils on maps and that will provide tower effectiveness, monster debuffs, or scale the difficulty and rewards of the encounter. Anointing amulets would allow you to allocate a notable on the amulet depending on the notable's oil recipe. Anointing rings will provide you with buffs for tower performance. Blighted maps, on the other hand, were a spin on the traditional map experience, as the tower defense minigame replaced all the monsters and side activities on that map. The tower defense will now spawn a lot of portals, and the activity had a timer in which you had to defend the pump until the timer reached 0 and all monsters got defeated. So, with all of that being said, let's dig into the cool stuff first and then the bad stuff. The anointing system was the biggest selling point for this league. Personally, I liked the mechanic. It was a very flexible way to reward the player, as it meant that as long as you had the required oils, your amulet could provide you with more damage, health, defenses, etc. The fact that you could anoint any amulet that was not corrupted allowed for some very cool interactions. For example, anointing Harui Ward with Hatter meant that the amulet now gave you 15% increased movement speed, and that was huge for leveling. On the other hand, anointing an amulet and then using Jorgin on research will allow you to convert the amulet into a talisman, but it kept the allocated notable. Of course, this interaction was implemented / fixed a bit after the league's release. The tower defense mechanic itself was fun, at least in my opinion. While you, or maybe someone else, may consider the Blight encounter as a gimmick, I do wanna say that GGG did good by introducing something fresh. It was pretty unique and challenging at times, and even though it took a while to make Blight a bit more rewarding, it felt good to defeat encounters. Blighted maps were blood-pumping activities early on in the league, and people slowly improved their builds to be able to handle them. Eventually, after a couple of patches and changes, Blighted maps became both lucrative and very enjoyable to run, though their rarity and scarcity sometimes meant that you were better off trading them for a nice amount of Chaos Orbs instead of running them. Sadly, Blight had way too many negatives that probably outshined the positives. The spawn rate for blighted maps were still pretty low. As I said before, in some cases you were better off training the maps away than doing them. Even though I'm pretty sure that they bumped the drop rate eventually, I still didn't get plenty of them as the league died down. One of the most common occurrences was having blight portals spawn right next to, if not inside the pump. Since the encounters got so hectic, this often meant insta losing the activity, which meant losing the map and getting nothing in return. Some towers were glitched at the start of the league. A tier 3 melee tower turning into petrifying one could turn mobs invincible while freezing them in place. Forever. If this happened inside a blighted map, it was GG, because you wouldn't be able to kill the monster at all. Oil rarity was also another thing. There were different tiers of oils, with the highest tiers being the rarest. While you could trade up your oils to get some of the rare oils, that meant upendering a lot of these lesser oils to get a rare one. Their spawn rates on maps and blighted maps were so low. Personally, I only found one golden oil naturally and a pair of silver oils. For the rest of the oils, I ended up with a couple of them, but they weren't a common occurrence either. In some cases I had to trade for the oils I needed. Build diversity also saw some aggressive streamlining. From the get-go it was pretty obvious which builds could easily thrive and which ones were going to struggle. Hint hint, if you had an army of minions there was little challenge. However, the downside of playing with the minions was that the slideshow probably wasn't very fun to witness, especially on blighted maps. Performance-wise, this league almost made me reconsider my PC. To say it was bad is a fat understatement. We're talking crashing, massive FPS drops, instances committing sudoku, and overall frustration. Performance on Path of Exile has always been questionable, as a lot of the in-game interactions tend to require a lot of processing power, and since blighted maps or blight encounters will vomit a billion monsters at a time, you can see how this brought a lot of devices to their knees. Personally, I am mostly sorry for those playing on console, because if my PC was borderline crying in a lot of these activities, I cannot fathom what a console could have felt like. While Blight was murdering your device with bad performance, servers were also screaming constantly. This had to be one of the, if not the laggiest league I've ever played. When I say lag, I don't mean frame drops. I'm talking rubber banding, volatile latency, instances dying, etc. Since Path of Exile is an online game, when it's suffering from latency issues, it's literally unplayable, and that's not nice at all. Lastly, population fall-off was steep. Now, I don't attribute this to Blight itself, as a good chunk of the issues got fixed or patched up to a more stable state eventually. But Blight's concept was something that a lot of people did not resonate with to begin with. Blight League started very close to hyped game releases. World of Warcraft Classic had come out recently, Borderlands 3 was coming out a couple weeks later, and Destiny 2's Shadowkeep roughly a month afterwards. Yes, they are not precisely competition to Path of Exile, but from my personal experience, it's very likely that whoever is into games like Path of Exile is also into looter shooter slash MMO slash RPG experiences, and this year had some very heavy hitters on its lineup, especially on these dates. The population dying off quickly is a bad thing, because if you are playing a trade league, gearing up your character can get a bit harder. That doesn't mean that you cannot acquire or sell your stuff, but it does mean that the trade experience could become a bit frustrating. Okay, so story time. Originally, this section of the video was me talking about how I wanted Blight to become part of the core experience, because we didn't know if that was gonna happen. However, yesterday, the 28th of November, they put out a blog post in which they stated that Blight will become part of the core game, at least on PC. Thanks to the difficulty changes on 3.9, Blight encounters will be harder on higher map tiers, and encounters will drop at least one oil or blighted map, which means anointing isn't going away, but will be harder / more expensive, and that is perfectly fine. So instead of keeping the rest of the recording redundant, I'm just gonna say that I'm glad that the unrighteous will keep getting turned to ash. All in all, the league was fine. It had its ups, plenty of downs, ugly ones and that, but still enjoyable. I like the league, and I'm actually happy that Blight wasn't scrapped, at least on PC, that is. So that's it for this league's recap. Thoroughly enjoyed doing it, and I'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on what I said, and hopefully I'll be able to do another one next league. As for other content, until Metamorph / 3.9, I don't have anything PoE related that I wanna talk about besides a league starter. But we cannot talk starters until we see the patch notes. Should be fun though, as I got a couple of ideas that I have not yet fully planned out because I don't have the patch notes, but we'll be talking about that topic pretty soon. soon. Besides that, Halo Reach comes out on Tuesday. I'll be jumping on that for a bit until PoE's content comes out. Reach will hopefully stick around in the channel afterwards as side content, but yeah, that's it for today's video. Actually, there is one last thing. We're slowly but surely approaching 100 subscribers. I know we're pretty small around here, but it's something so unreal, and I do wanna thank every single person that has been subscribing, watching and liking the vids. There's still a very long road ahead, and hopefully we find the means to traverse it pretty soon. So with that note, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be a good December for content, I can feel it. So yeah, thanks again, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.